Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. My sister Brooke and I had been driving since noon, crossing from Ohio into Kentucky on our way to visit our mom in Nashville. She had just gotten out of surgery, hip replacement, and we wanted to surprise her before the weekend. Brooke was 2 years older than me, the responsible one who always insisted on planning every detail of every trip. But that night, even she admitted we had pushed too far. The highway stretched endlessly through farmland and patches of dense forest, and by 11 at night, my eyes burned from staring at taillights and yellow lane markers. We had passed the last lit gas station about 40 minutes back, and the caffeine from my third gas station coffee had worn off somewhere around the state line. Brooke suggested we pull over at the next rest stop just for 20 minutes, stretch our legs and splash some water on our faces. I agreed without hesitation. My graduation from nursing school 2 years prior had taught me plenty about exhaustion, and I knew we were both running on fumes. The rest stop appeared like a mirage after another 15 miles of nothing but darkness and the occasional reflective deer eyes glinting from the tree line. A faded green sign announced it half a mile ahead, and I flicked on my turn signal more out of habit than necessity since we had not seen another car in at least 10 minutes. The parking lot was small, maybe 20 spaces total, with a squat brick building housing the restrooms at the far end. A single overhead lamp buzzed near the building entrance, casting a weak orange glow that barely reached the pavement below. Everything else sat in shadow. I pulled our Toyota Camry into a spot near the entrance, close to the restrooms, and that is when I noticed the only other vehicle there. A black SUV, something large like a Tahoe or Suburban, parked at the opposite end of the lot near the tree line. Every single window was tinted so dark I could not tell if anyone was inside. The engine was off, no lights, no movement. Brooke glanced at it and made a small sound in her throat, something between acknowledgement and unease, but neither of us said anything. We were too tired to read into things. Brooke grabbed her purse and opened the passenger door, and the night air hit us immediately, thick and humid with that earthy smell of summer in the south. Crickets screamed from the woods surrounding the rest stop, so loud it almost felt aggressive. I stepped out and stretched my back, feeling every vertebra pop after hours of hunching behind the wheel. The brick restroom building looked ancient, probably built sometime in the 70s and never updated since. Graffiti covered the walls near the entrance, crude drawings and phone numbers and the usual obscenities people carve into public spaces. A vending machine stood beside the women's door, its front panel cracked and dark, clearly out of order for months or maybe years. Brooke walked ahead of me, her sandals slapping against the concrete, and I followed a few steps behind. Neither of us looked back at the SUV. I told myself there was nothing unusual about another vehicle at a rest stop, even at this hour. Truckers pulled over all the time. Families on road trips stopped to let their kids use the bathroom. I was being paranoid because I was exhausted, and exhaustion makes everything feel threatening. That is what I kept repeating in my head as I pushed open the bathroom door. The inside of the restroom smelled like industrial cleaner, mixed with something sour underneath, like mildew that no amount of chemicals could fully mask. 2 of the 4 fluorescent lights overhead flickered in that erratic pattern that always makes me think of horror movies, and I actually laughed a little at myself for the thought. Brooke took the first stall while I went to the sink to splash cold water on my face. The mirror above the basin was scratched and clouded, and my reflection looked like a ghost of myself, pale and hollow-eyed. I cupped the water in my hands and pressed it against my cheeks, my forehead, the back of my neck. It helped a little. Brooke finished and came to wash her hands beside me, and we exchanged that silent look sisters share when neither wants to admit they feel uneasy. We dried our hands on paper towels that felt more like sandpaper and headed back toward the exit. That is when I heard it. An engine turning over, low and rumbling coming from somewhere in the parking lot. I pushed the door open and stepped outside, and the black SUV that had been parked at the far end of the lot was now moving. Slowly, deliberately, it rolled across the empty spaces toward our car. Brooke grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks. We stood frozen in the doorway of the restroom, watching as the SUV crept forward with its headlights off. Just this massive black shape gliding through the darkness like a predator. It stopped directly behind our Camry, positioning itself so that its front bumper nearly touched our rear. The angle was precise, calculated, blocking our only clear path to the exit lane. My mind raced through explanations. Maybe the driver was just repositioning. Maybe they wanted to use the bathroom and preferred parking closer to the building. But nobody got out. The engine kept running, a low idle that seemed to pulse through the humid air. I could feel it more than hear it, this vibration that settled into my chest. Brooke whispered my name, just barely, and her voice cracked on the second syllable. I did not look at her because I could not take my eyes off that SUV, waiting for a door to open, for some explanation that would make this make sense. We started walking toward our car, trying to keep our pace normal, like nothing was wrong. My keys were already in my hand, and I pressed the unlock button twice, watching the Camry's lights flash in response. 20 feet felt like 100. The SUV just sat there, engine humming, windows so dark I could not see even the outline of a person inside. We reached our car, and I yanked the driver door open, practically throwing myself into the seat while Brooke scrambled in beside me. The second her door closed, I hit the lock button and jammed the key into the ignition. That is when someone knocked on my window. The sound was sharp, deliberate, knuckles against glass, and I jerked so hard my knee slammed into the steering column. A man stood beside my door, appearing from nowhere, or maybe he had been crouched beside the SUV the whole time. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie despite the heat, and his face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hood. He knocked again, softer this time, and then he spoke through the glass. His voice was muffled, but I could make out the words. He said his car would not start, said he needed a jump, asked if we had cables. Everything about this was wrong, and I knew it. His car was clearly running, the engine still rumbling behind us, blocking our exit. I shook my head through the window without rolling it down, mouthing the word, sorry, pretending I did not understand. The man tilted his head slightly, and even though I could not see his eyes clearly, I felt them on me. He knocked again, harder this time, and pointed toward the SUV with his other hand, gesturing for me to get out. Brooke had her phone in her hand, trying to call someone, anyone, but I could see the screen from the corner of my eye. No signal, not even one bar. These rural stretches of Kentucky were notorious for dead zones, and we had driven straight into one. The man kept talking, his voice rising just enough to sound insistent, and then I saw movement in my side mirror. Another figure, shorter but broader, walking around the back of our car from the passenger side. He moved slowly, casually, like someone out for an evening stroll, but his path was deliberate. He was circling, positioning himself at Brooke's door. I turned the key and the engine came to life, and I have never been more grateful for a sound in my entire life. The man at my window stepped back just slightly, surprised maybe, or recalculating. I threw the car into reverse without thinking, my foot pressing the gas before my brain fully processed what I was doing. The Camry lurched backward, and I heard the sickening crunch of plastic and metal as my bumper connected with the SUV behind us. But I did not stop. I kept reversing, turning the wheel hard, trying to angle around the massive vehicle blocking our path. The SUV moved with us. Whoever was inside matched my movements, inching backward as I reversed, keeping that gap closed. It was like they had done this before, like they knew exactly how to trap a smaller car in a parking lot with no witnesses. The man at my window started jogging alongside us, slapping his palm against the glass, and his voice changed. Gone was the pretense of needing help. He was yelling now, demanding we stop, using words I will not repeat. Brooke was screaming beside me, telling me to go, just go. And I was trying, God, I was trying, but there was nowhere to go. Then headlights appeared on the highway, a pair of them, bright and distant, coming from the direction we had arrived. I saw them through the trees first, flickering between the branches, and then they swung onto the exit ramp leading into the rest stop. The reaction was immediate. The man at my window stopped slapping the glass and turned toward the approaching vehicle. The SUV behind us suddenly lurched backward, creating a gap it had refused to give us seconds before. I did not hesitate. I slammed the car into drive and floored the accelerator, aiming for that narrow opening between the SUV and the concrete barrier marking the edge of the parking lot. The Camry scraped against something. I heard metal shrieking against metal, but I did not care. We shot forward, and I yanked the wheel toward the exit lane just as a semi-truck pulled into the rest stop, its air brakes hissing as it slowed down. The driver must have seen us tearing out of there because his horn blasted, long and deafening, echoing across the empty lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw the SUV reversing rapidly toward the tree line, pulling back into the shadows where it had been waiting when we first arrived. We did not stop until we reached the next town, a tiny cluster of buildings called Greenville or Greenfield, something like that, about 20 miles down the highway. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the kind with neon signs and truckers eating pie at the counter, and I put the car in park and just sat there. My entire body was shaking, this uncontrollable tremor that started in my legs and worked its way up through my chest and into my jaw. Brooke was crying silently beside me, tears streaming down her face while she clutched her phone like a lifeline. Neither of us spoke for what felt like 10 minutes. Finally, she looked at me and asked if that had really just happened, and I did not know how to answer her. The back of our car was destroyed, the bumper hanging off at an angle and deep scratches gouged into the trunk where we had scraped past the SUV. That was real. That was proof. We had not imagined anything. I wanted to call the police, but I did not even know where to begin. What would I say? 2 men in an SUV scared us at a rest stop? They never touched us. They never explicitly threatened us. All they did was ask for a jump and block our car. But we both knew what would have happened if that truck had not shown up when it did. We ended up calling the police from the diner after the waitress let us use their landline. A deputy showed up about 40 minutes later, a tired-looking man named Gentry, who listened to our story with the kind of expression that told me he had heard something like this before. He took notes, asked us to describe the SUV and the men as best we could, and told us he would file a report. When I asked if there had been other incidents at that rest stop, he paused for a moment before answering. He said there had been complaints, vague things, travelers reporting feeling unsafe or seeing suspicious vehicles, but nothing concrete, no arrests, no victims who stuck around long enough to press charges. He told us we were smart to keep our doors locked, smart to run when we did. The way he said it made me feel sick, like he was congratulating us on surviving something that should not happen in the first place. Before he left, he mentioned that the state had been talking about closing that rest stop for years due to budget cuts, that there was no staff after dark and no security cameras. Places like that attract a certain kind of person, he said. I think about those words more than I should. Brooke and I made it to Nashville the next morning, driving straight through the night because neither of us could stomach the thought of stopping again. We told our mom a shortened version of what happened, enough to explain why her 2 daughters showed up looking like they had not slept in days. She cried and held us, and made us promise to never travel that stretch of highway again after dark. I kept that promise for almost 2 years before work forced me to make a similar drive. That time I booked a hotel room halfway and paid extra for one near a police station. Some people might read this and think we overreacted, that maybe those men really did need help, and we just panicked. But I remember the way the SUV moved with us, inch by inch, refusing to let us leave. I remember the coordination between the man at my window and the one circling behind. I remember how fast they retreated the moment witnesses arrived. That was not a misunderstanding. That was a trap, practiced and patient, waiting in the dark for someone tired enough to stop. We were almost the ones who did not drive away. Every time I pass a rest stop now, even in broad daylight, I keep driving. I would rather run out of gas on the shoulder than pull into one of those places ever again. Friday nights usually meant overtime at the warehouse, and that November in 2014 was no different. My graduating class from high school back in 2005 had scattered across the country chasing careers and families, but I stayed in rural Ohio, working logistics for a distribution company outside of Columbus. The pay was decent, the hours were brutal during peak season, and by the time my shift ended at 2 in the morning, the roads between the warehouse and my apartment were completely deserted. I preferred it that way. No traffic, no headlights in my mirrors, just me and the hum of my old Ford pickup cutting through the darkness. That particular Friday had been exhausting. 14 hours of loading trucks and dealing with a computer system that kept crashing every 20 minutes. All I wanted was to get home, crack open a beer, and pass out on my couch with some late-night television droning in the background. I took my usual route, avoiding the interstate and sticking to the state highways that wound through farmland and patches of forest. The roads were empty, as expected, and a light fog had started creeping across the pavement in thin wisps. My headlights carved tunnels through the mist, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the occasional reflective mile marker. I had the radio tuned to some AM station playing old country songs, the kind my father used to listen to when I was a kid riding shotgun in his truck. Somewhere around mile marker 47, I decided to take a shortcut through an exit ramp that connected to a county road. It shaved about 10 minutes off my commute, and at that hour, every minute counted. I slowed down as I approached the curve of the ramp, my headlights sweeping across the guardrail and the tall grass beyond it. And that is when I saw something that made me ease off the gas pedal completely, my foot hovering over the brake as my brain struggled to process what my eyes were showing me. A baby car seat, right there in the middle of the exit ramp, sitting upright on the cracked asphalt like someone had placed it there with purpose. It was one of those infant carriers with the curved bottom and the handle arched over the top, the kind you see parents lugging around grocery stores and parking lots. The fabric looked pale in my headlights, maybe gray, maybe light blue, and there was a small blanket draped over it, partially covering whatever might be inside. I brought my truck to a complete stop about 30 feet away, my engine idling rough in the cold air. My first thought was that someone had been in an accident, that a car had gone off the road and I just could not see it from this angle. But there were no skid marks, no broken glass, no debris scattered across the pavement. The guardrail was intact. There was nothing, no vehicle, no person, no indication of how that car seat had ended up in the middle of a deserted exit ramp at 2:30 in the morning. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at that seat through my windshield, and every instinct in my body started screaming at me in two different directions. Part of me wanted to throw the truck in park, run out there and check if there was actually a baby inside that carrier. Because if there was, if some infant had been abandoned out here in the freezing November night, I could not just drive away. That is not the kind of person I am. But another part of me, a deeper and more primal part, was telling me that something about this whole situation was wrong. The placement was too deliberate. The exit ramp was too remote. I looked around, scanning the darkness beyond my headlights, and that is when I noticed the embankment on the right side of the road. Tall grass, dead and brown from the autumn frost, stretched up a slight hill toward a tree line about 50 yards away. And in that grass, barely visible in the ambient glow from my truck, I saw movement. Just a subtle shift, like someone or something adjusting their position. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I did not move. I just sat there, engine running, headlights pointed straight at that car seat, and I watched. The movement in the grass had stopped, but now that I knew where to look, I could make out a shape crouched low among the weeds. It was definitely a person. I could see the outline of shoulders, the curve of a head ducked down like they were trying to stay hidden. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I thought about honking my horn, about rolling down my window and yelling out to ask if someone needed help, but something kept me from doing it. Instead, I reached over to the passenger seat where I kept a heavy flashlight, one of those metal ones that took 4D batteries and could double as a weapon if needed. I grabbed it and pointed it toward the embankment without turning it on, just holding it, feeling its weight in my hand. The figure in the grass still was not moving. Whoever it was, they were waiting for me to get out of my truck. That realization hit me like a punch to the chest. This was a trap. The car seat, the empty road, the complete absence of any other vehicle or explanation. It was all designed to make someone stop, to make someone get out. I had heard stories like this before, urban legends passed around at work or shared on the internet. Tales of criminals using fake emergencies to lure good Samaritans into vulnerable positions. Carjackings, robberies, worse. I always figured those stories were exaggerated, the kind of paranoid warnings that bored people spread around to scare each other. But sitting there on that exit ramp, staring at a baby seat that had no business being there while a stranger hid in the brush 20 feet away, those stories did not feel like legends anymore. I slowly moved my foot from the brake to the gas pedal, keeping my eyes locked on the embankment. And then I saw a second shape rise slightly from the grass, further up the hill, closer to the tree line. There were at least 2 of them out there. My mouth went dry. I pressed the gas pedal gently, just enough to start rolling forward, and I angled my truck to go around the car seat on the left side where there was a gap between the carrier and the guardrail. I did not want to run it over. Some irrational part of my brain still wondered if there might actually be an infant inside, even though logic was screaming at me that this was all staged. As my truck crept forward, the first figure in the grass suddenly stood up. It was a man, tall and lean, wearing dark clothes and something covering the lower half of his face, like a bandana or a gaiter pulled up to his nose. He did not run toward me, did not yell, did not do anything dramatic. He just stood there and watched my truck roll past, his eyes catching the reflection of my headlights for just a second. That calm, patient stillness was more terrifying than if he had charged at my door. He looked like someone who had done this before, someone who knew that not every target would take the bait, and he was already calculating his next move. I cleared the car seat and punched the gas, my tires squealing against the cold pavement as I accelerated down the rest of the exit ramp. In my rearview mirror, I saw the second figure emerge fully from the tree line, shorter, stockier, moving quickly down the hill toward the road. The first man had turned to watch my truck disappear, and I could swear I saw him pull something from his pocket, maybe a phone, maybe something else. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, and I did not slow down until I hit the county road and put at least 3 miles between me and that exit ramp. I was breathing hard, my chest heaving like I had just sprinted a mile, and the adrenaline was making my vision sharp and jittery at the same time. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see headlights appear behind me, expecting to hear the roar of an engine closing the distance. But the road stayed dark and empty, and after a few minutes, I started to believe that I had actually gotten away. I did not go home. The thought of leading anyone back to my apartment, even if I was not being followed, made my skin prickle with unease. Instead, I drove straight to a gas station about 8 miles down the road, one of those 24-hour places with bright fluorescent lights and security cameras mounted on every corner. I pulled into a parking spot right in front of the entrance, killed my engine, and just sat there for a while, trying to calm down. My legs felt weak, like they would not support me if I tried to stand. An older woman working the night shift inside glanced at me through the window, probably wondering why some guy in a beat-up pickup was just sitting in her parking lot at 3 in the morning. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and called 911. I told the dispatcher everything: the car seat, the figures in the grass, the location of the exit ramp. She asked me if I had seen any weapons, if anyone had approached my vehicle, if I could describe the individuals in more detail. I answered as best I could, my voice still shaky, and she told me that officers would be dispatched to check the area. She also told me something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. There had been 2 other reports that month from the same stretch of highway. One was a woman who had seen a similar setup on a different exit ramp about 5 miles north. A stroller that time, sitting in the middle of the road with a blanket draped over it. She had not stopped either, had driven straight to the nearest police station to report it. The other was a man who had actually pulled over to check on what he thought was an abandoned infant carrier. He had been jumped by 3 individuals before he even made it out of his car. Beaten badly, his wallet and phone stolen, his vehicle taken. The dispatcher said he had spent 4 days in the hospital with a fractured eye socket and broken ribs. She thanked me for reporting what I had seen and told me I had made the right choice by not stopping. I sat in that gas station parking lot for another hour after the call ended, watching every car that passed on the road, unable to shake the image of that tall man standing in the grass, watching me drive away with those calm, patient eyes. When I finally made it home that night, I locked every door and window in my apartment, wedged a chair under the front door handle, and sat on my couch with every light on until the sun came up. I did not sleep. I could not. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that car seat sitting in the beam of my headlights, so perfectly placed, so deliberately staged. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I had gotten out of my truck, if I had walked over to check on what I thought was an abandoned baby, my back turned to the embankment, completely vulnerable. Would they have hit me from behind before I even knew they were coming? Would I have ended up like that other man, broken and bleeding on the side of a road that nobody traveled at night? Or would it have been worse? The dispatcher had mentioned robberies and carjackings, but she had not said those were the only things that happened in cases like this. She had left a lot unsaid, and my imagination filled in the gaps with possibilities I did not want to consider. The police called me back 2 days later. A detective named Holloway told me they had found the car seat still on the exit ramp when officers arrived, but whoever had been hiding in the grass was long gone. They recovered footprints in the mud along the embankment, at least 3 distinct sets confirming there had been more people out there than I had even seen. The car seat itself was empty, just a prop, purchased secondhand according to a faded tag still attached to the handle. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing that could identify who had set the trap. Holloway said they had increased patrols on that stretch of highway, but he was blunt with me. These kinds of operations were hard to catch because the people running them knew how to disappear fast. He told me I was lucky, that my instincts had probably saved my life that night. I thanked him and hung up, but the word lucky did not sit right with me. I did not feel lucky. I felt hunted. I changed my route to work after that, adding 20 extra minutes to my commute just to avoid that part of the highway. And even now, years later, I still slow down whenever I see something unexpected on the road at night. I still check the tree line, the ditches, the shadows beyond my headlights, because I know now that not every cry for help is real, and some traps are designed for people who just want to do the right thing. Nobody warns you about the silence. That particular kind of silence you only find on rural highways past midnight, where the road stretches like a black ribbon into nothing, and your headlights feel like the last source of light left in the world. I was driving from Portland to Boise that night, a 6-hour haul I had done maybe a dozen times before to visit my brother and his family. My daughter had just started kindergarten that fall, which meant I was officially part of that generation of adults who remember life before smartphones, but now cannot function without GPS. The clock on my dashboard read 1:47 in the morning, and I had been on the road since finishing my shift at the warehouse around 10. Coffee from a gas station 60 miles back was the only thing keeping my eyes open, and even that was starting to fail me. The man appeared in my headlights like a ghost rising from the asphalt. 1 second the road was empty, and the next, there he was, standing on the shoulder with his thumb out and a large hiking backpack hanging from one shoulder. My first instinct was to keep driving, the way my father taught me, the way anyone with sense would do on a frozen highway in the middle of nowhere. But something made me slow down. Maybe it was the temperature gauge reading 19 degrees outside. Maybe it was the fact that I had not seen another car in over 40 minutes and knew he could freeze to death before anyone else came along. Maybe I just remembered being 23 and broke, hitching rides myself between college and my parents' house during winter breaks. Whatever the reason, I pulled onto the gravel shoulder about 50 feet past him, watching in my rearview mirror as he jogged toward my car, his breath forming thick clouds in the frozen air. He climbed into the passenger seat with a quick nod of thanks, pulling the heavy backpack onto his lap instead of tossing it in the back. I noticed that immediately. The bag was army green, covered in patches and pins, stuffed so full that the zipper looked ready to burst. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s, with a patchy beard that grew in uneven clumps across his jaw and cheeks. His eyes were pale blue, almost gray, and they darted around the interior of my car like he was cataloging every detail. He wore a brown corduroy jacket that was way too thin for this weather, and his fingernails were bitten down to raw pink crescents. The smell hit me next, not unwashed exactly, but something sharper underneath, like copper and sweat mixed together. I told him my name was Gary, asked where he was headed. He said east, just east, and that was good enough for now. His voice was flat, almost mechanical, like he was reading from a script he had memorized long ago. I pulled back onto the highway and tried to make small talk the way you do with strangers, asking about where he was coming from, what brought him out here in the middle of the night. He answered in fragments that never quite connected. Said he had been in Portland for a while, said he had business to handle. Said the buses stopped running when he needed them and that walking was fine until the temperature dropped. Every answer felt like a door closing rather than opening, so after a few minutes I stopped asking and let the silence fill the car. That was when he reached forward and turned off my radio without asking, killing the low hum of classic rock that had been my only company for the past 2 hours. The sudden quiet felt heavier than before, almost physical, pressing against my eardrums like a change in altitude. For about 20 miles neither of us spoke. I kept my eyes on the road, watching the white dashes disappear under my hood one after another, trying to calculate how long until the next town. My GPS showed a gas station in Huntington, still 43 miles ahead, and I started planning to stop there whether I needed fuel or not. Just to get out, breathe some fresh air, maybe give this guy a chance to find another ride. Then he laughed. Not at anything I said, not at anything on the road, just a sudden sharp burst of sound that came out of nowhere and stopped just as quickly. I glanced at him and he was staring straight ahead through the windshield, his lips moving slightly like he was having a conversation with someone I could not see. When he noticed me looking, he turned and smiled, and there was nothing behind that smile. No warmth, no humor, just teeth and stretched skin. He asked me if I believed in fate. I said I did not know. He said that was the wrong answer. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life up until that point. He started talking, really talking, in this rapid stream of consciousness that jumped from topic to topic without any logic I could follow. He talked about a woman named Diane who had ruined his life, then about a dog he had as a kid that his father drowned in the bathtub, then about how the government was tracking people through cell phone towers and that was why he never carried one. His voice would shift from a whisper to nearly shouting and back again within the same sentence. At one point he punched the dashboard hard enough to make me flinch, then immediately apologized with that same empty smile and said he just got excited sometimes. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to pull over and tell him to get out. But we were in the middle of absolute nowhere, no lights visible in any direction, and something told me that stopping the car right now would be a very bad idea. He wanted to know why I had picked him up. I told him the truth, that it was cold, and I did not want him to freeze. He considered this for a long moment, tilting his head like a bird examining something shiny, then said that was a weak reason. Said most people who stopped for strangers at night were either looking for something or running from something. Asked which one I was. I said neither, that I was just driving to see my brother. He made a sound in his throat, something between a grunt and a laugh, then unzipped his backpack about halfway. I tried not to look, but I could not help it. Inside I saw clothes bundled into tight rolls, a flashlight, what looked like a bundle of zip ties, and the handle of something metallic catching the glow from my dashboard lights. He noticed me noticing and zipped it back up slowly, deliberately, holding eye contact the whole time. His pale eyes never blinked. He said he liked to be prepared for anything, said you never knew what kind of people you might meet on the road at night. The GPS announced that Huntington was now 26 miles away. 26 miles had never sounded so far in my entire life. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel and tried to keep my breathing steady, tried to act like I had not just seen what I saw. The man started asking about my route, why I was taking this highway instead of the interstate, whether I always drove this way. When I explained it was shorter and I knew the roads well, he shook his head and said I should take the next left, that he knew a faster way. There was no next left, not on this stretch, nothing but empty fields and distant mountains for miles. I told him I would stick to my route and his whole demeanor changed in an instant. The fake friendliness dropped away like a mask falling off, and underneath was something cold and rigid. He said he was not asking. His right hand drifted back toward the backpack on his lap, fingers brushing against the zipper. I have replayed the next few seconds in my head hundreds of times since that night, trying to understand how I managed to think so clearly when every cell in my body was screaming in pure terror. He unzipped the bag fully and pulled out a hunting knife with a serrated edge, the kind designed to gut deer, and held it casually against his thigh like it was the most natural thing in the world. He told me to stay calm, that nobody had to get hurt as long as I did exactly what he said. His voice had changed again, lower now, controlled, almost businesslike. He said there was a service road coming up in about 8 miles and I was going to take it. Said he had done this before and it always went smoother when people cooperated. I asked him what he wanted. Money, the car, anything he wanted he could have. He smiled again, that horrible empty smile, and said it was not about what he wanted. It was about what he needed, and what he needed was for me to stop asking questions and start driving where he told me to drive. My mind raced through every possible option. I could slam on the brakes, but he was already holding the knife and I would never get my seatbelt off before he reached me. I could try to crash the car, but at 70 miles per hour on a frozen road that was just as likely to kill me as him. I could try to fight, but he was younger and clearly prepared for resistance. Then I remembered something my father told me once about defensive driving, about how the person behind the wheel always has more control than they realize. I started slowing down gradually, just a few miles per hour at a time, watching the speedometer drop from 70 to 65 to 60. He did not notice at first, too busy scanning the darkness ahead for his service road. By the time we hit 55, I spotted what I had been praying for since he pulled out that knife. Headlights in my rearview mirror coming up fast, maybe half a mile back. Another car, the first one I had seen in over an hour. I made a decision right then that would either save my life or end it. I waited until the headlights were close enough that I could tell it was a truck, something big, 18 wheels maybe. Then I did 3 things in rapid succession. I slammed my hand down on the horn and held it there. I flicked my headlights from low to high beam over and over, and I started swerving across both lanes in a pattern that no sober driver would ever make. The man screamed at me to stop, lunging forward with the knife, but my swerving threw off his balance, and the blade caught the fabric of my jacket sleeve instead of my arm. The truck behind us responded exactly the way I hoped, laying on its own horn and flashing its lights, then pulling up alongside us in the oncoming lane. I could see the driver, a heavy-set man with a beard, his face twisted in confusion and concern as he tried to figure out what was happening. I pointed frantically at my passenger, mouthing the word help over and over, and I watched understanding dawn on the trucker's face. He grabbed something from his dashboard, a radio, and started talking into it while matching my speed. The man in my passenger seat went completely still, watching the truck with those pale, dead eyes, calculating his odds. Then he did something I did not expect. He started laughing, a high-pitched wheeze that sounded like air escaping from a punctured tire. He told me I was smarter than the others, said most people just did what they were told until it was too late. Then he reached over and pulled the door handle while we were still moving at 40 miles per hour. The door flew open, and the wind rushed in like a living thing, filling the car with noise and frozen air. He looked at me one last time, still smiling that terrible smile, and said he would remember my face. Then he tucked the knife back into his bag, clutched the backpack to his chest, and threw himself out of my moving car into the darkness beyond the shoulder. I slammed on the brakes so hard the anti-lock system screamed beneath my feet. The truck pulled over ahead of me and the driver came running back, asking if I was okay, saying he had already called the state police on his CB radio. I could not answer him. I just sat there behind the wheel, staring at the open passenger door swinging gently in the wind, my whole body shaking so hard I could hear my teeth rattling against each other. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they searched the area for over an hour with flashlights and dogs. They found nothing. No footprints in the frozen grass, no blood, no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. The officer who took my statement said it was possible the man had a vehicle stashed nearby, that predators like that often planned escape routes in advance. He also told me that I was lucky, that 3 women had gone missing on this same stretch of highway over the past 2 years. They never found them. I made it to my brother's house by sunrise, and I have not driven that road at night ever again. Sometimes I still dream about those pale eyes watching me from the shoulder of some empty highway, thumb out, waiting for the next person kind enough to stop. Rural Kansas has a way of swallowing people whole, and I almost became one of its statistics on a Thursday night in early March of 2017. I had been driving for about 5 hours straight, heading back to Denver after a cousin's funeral in Topeka. One of those obligations where you barely knew the person, but your mom guilts you into showing up anyway. Everyone from my graduating class of 2012 was posting photos of their kids and promotions, while I sat in a church pew, pretending to remember a man I had met maybe 3 times in my entire life. The storm came out of nowhere, the way they do in that part of the country, turning the highway into a river, and the sky into something that looked almost solid. My windshield wipers were losing the battle, and every pair of headlights coming from the opposite direction felt like a threat. When the GPS suggested an alternate route to avoid reported flooding ahead, I took it without thinking twice. That was my first mistake. Exit 74 didn't even have a proper sign, just a metal post with reflectors that caught my headlights for half a second, before I was already committed to the turn. The road narrowed immediately, going from 2 lanes to something that felt more like a wide hiking trail, the kind of path that made my Subaru's suspension groan in protest with every pothole. According to my phone, I was driving through a town called Ridgeback, and the screen showed neat little house icons lining both sides of the road like a normal residential area. But when I squinted through the rain, all I saw was darkness. No porch lights, no glowing windows, no signs of life whatsoever. I figured maybe everyone had lost power because of the storm, which would make sense given how violent the weather had become. The thunder was so loud it vibrated through my chest, and lightning would occasionally illuminate the landscape in brief, harsh flashes. In those moments of brightness, I caught glimpses of empty fields and shapes that might have been structures, but looked wrong somehow, too angular, too skeletal. The first mailbox I passed made me slow down. It was standing there at the edge of the road, rusted and crooked, with the name Pemberton barely visible in faded paint. My GPS showed a house icon right where the mailbox stood, but behind it there was nothing. Just an empty lot filled with overgrown weeds and what looked like the concrete outline of a foundation, cracked and broken like old bones poking through dead skin. I told myself the house must have been demolished recently, that maybe the GPS data was outdated. But then I passed another mailbox and another, and each one stood guard over the same emptiness. Lots where homes should have been, some with nothing but charred remains, others with just flat dirt and scattered debris. One of them still had a child's bicycle lying in the grass, its frame twisted and orange with rust, and I remember thinking that no kid had touched that thing in years. The rain kept hammering my windshield, and my phone kept insisting I was surrounded by civilization. I pulled over near what the GPS claimed was an intersection. though in reality, it was just a T-junction where the gravel met an even rougher dirt path. My signal had dropped to 1 bar, and the map was taking forever to reload. I needed to figure out where I was and how to get back to the highway, because nothing about this place matched what my screen was showing me. That's when I noticed something strange about the silence. The rain was still falling hard, the thunder still rolling in the distance, but underneath all that noise there was an absence. No dogs barking, no generators humming, no sounds of life at all. I looked around through my rain-streaked windows and realized I couldn't see a single light anywhere. Not a farmhouse in the distance, not a radio tower blinking red. Nothing. Just absolute darkness pressing against my car from all sides like deep water. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but the call wouldn't connect. The screen just showed that spinning circle that means your phone is trying and failing to reach the outside world. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. At first, I felt relief. Another car meant another person, someone who knew these roads and could point me back toward the highway. The lights were far away, maybe half a mile, but they were getting closer. I watched them bounce and sway as the vehicle navigated the same terrible road I had just traveled, and I remember thinking I should flash my hazards to get their attention. But something made me hesitate. The car wasn't moving like someone just passing through. It was moving slowly, deliberately, like it was searching for something. Then another set of headlights appeared, this time from the dirt path ahead of me, coming from the direction the GPS wanted me to go. 2 vehicles approaching from opposite directions, both moving at that same strange crawling pace. My hand hovered over the gear shift, but I didn't know which way to run. The road behind me had those headlights blocking it, and the road ahead had the second car approaching. I was stuck at that T-junction like a mouse in a trap that had already snapped shut. The car behind me reached me first. It was a pickup truck, old and mud-caked, the kind of vehicle you see rusting in fields all across the Midwest. It stopped about 30 feet behind my Subaru, its headlights flooding my mirrors with harsh white light. I couldn't see the driver through the glare, just the silhouette of a figure sitting motionless behind the wheel. Then the car from ahead arrived, a dark sedan with a dented hood and no front license plate. It pulled up slowly and stopped about 20 feet in front of me, positioning itself at an angle that blocked any chance I had of squeezing past. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rain kept falling, the engines kept idling, and I sat there gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles went pale. Then, with a synchronization that felt rehearsed, both drivers opened their doors at the exact same time. I watched 2 figures step out into the rain, neither one making any move to approach me yet. They just stood there beside their vehicles, faces hidden in shadow, waiting for something I couldn't understand. A third door opened. I hadn't even noticed there was a passenger in the sedan until a woman climbed out from the back seat. She was tall and thin, wearing a raincoat that hung off her frame like wet paper, and she was the first one to move toward me. Her walk was casual, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. The 2 men, I could tell they were men now from their builds, stayed by their vehicles, watching. The woman stopped about 10 feet from my driver's side window and just stared at me through the rain. Lightning flashed, and for a split second I saw her face clearly. She looked ordinary, maybe in her 50s, with short gray hair plastered to her forehead and an expression that was completely blank. No anger, no threat, no emotion at all. That emptiness scared me more than anything else. She raised one hand slowly and made a cranking motion, telling me to roll down my window. I shook my head no and reached for my phone again, even though I knew it was useless. She watched me fumble with the device, and something close to amusement flickered across her face before it went blank again. The man from the pickup truck started walking toward me too. He was younger than the woman, maybe in his 30s, with broad shoulders and a thick beard that caught rainwater and held it. He positioned himself on the passenger side of my car, and now I had 2 people flanking me while the third man stayed by the sedan. My doors were locked. I had checked 3 times by this point, but that felt like such a pathetic defense against whatever was happening. The woman leaned closer to my window and said something I couldn't hear through the glass and the rain. I shook my head again, pointing at my ear like I didn't understand, which was true. She smiled then, just for a moment, and knocked on the glass with her knuckle. Not hard, not aggressive, just a polite little tap like she was visiting a neighbor. The bearded man mirrored her on the other side, tapping at the passenger window with the same casual rhythm. They were patient. They knew I had nowhere to go, and the way they looked at me through those rain-streaked windows made it clear they had done this before. I thought about my options while they stood there in the rain, watching me like I was a fish in a tank. I could try to ram one of the vehicles, but my Subaru wasn't built for that kind of impact, and their cars were positioned too precisely for me to get around them. I could honk my horn and hope someone heard, but there was no one to hear. That much was obvious. The woman knocked again, harder this time, and pointed at my door lock. The gesture was so matter-of-fact, like she was simply asking me to do something reasonable. The bearded man pulled something from his jacket, and in the flash of lightning, I saw it was a crowbar. He didn't raise it or threaten me with it. He just held it loosely at his side, letting me know it was there. That was when the reality of my situation hit me fully. These people weren't going to hurt me right away. They were going to wait. They would outlast me, drain my gas tank with the engine running, wait for my phone to die, wait for me to make a desperate move they could exploit. They had clearly done this enough times to know exactly how it went. Then I remembered something my dad had told me years ago, back when I was learning to drive. He was a paranoid man, my father. The kind of guy who kept a flashlight and a knife in every room of the house. He had made me promise that if I ever found myself in a situation where someone was trying to get me out of my car, I should never get out. But I should also never sit still. Movement was safety, stillness was death. My eyes flicked to the left side of the road, where the empty lot with the Pemberton mailbox sat in darkness. There was no fence, no barrier, just overgrown grass and mud. The pickup behind me was blocking the road, but it wasn't blocking that lot. If I could get my car across that patch of land, there might be a way around them. It was insane. My Subaru was all-wheel drive, sure, but it wasn't built for off-roading in a thunderstorm. But the alternative was sitting there until these people found a way inside. I made my decision in the span of a single heartbeat. I threw my car into drive and yanked the wheel hard to the left. The Subaru lurched forward and bounced off the gravel onto the muddy grass. I heard the woman shout something, the first real sound any of them had made. And in my rearview mirror, I saw her stumble back as my car swerved past her. The bearded man tried to grab at my door handle, but his fingers slipped on the wet metal, and then I was past him, tires spinning and throwing mud everywhere. The lot was rougher than I expected, full of hidden dips and debris buried under the weeds, and my car bucked like an animal trying to throw me off. I hit something hard, maybe a chunk of old foundation, maybe a rock, and my entire frame shuddered, but I kept my foot on the gas. The headlights from the pickup swung around as the driver realized what I was doing, but he was too slow. I cleared the lot and crashed through a line of dead bushes onto what looked like an old service road running parallel to the main path. I didn't know where it led. I didn't care. All that mattered was that I was moving, and they were behind me. I drove like a maniac for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. The service road connected to another gravel path, which connected to a slightly better road, which eventually, mercifully, brought me to a state highway with actual lane markings and working streetlights. I pulled into the first gas station I found, a little 24-hour place with bright fluorescent lights and a bored teenager behind the counter, and I sat in the parking lot crying for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I bought a coffee I didn't drink, and asked the kid if he knew anything about Ridgeback. He looked at me like I was crazy and said he had never heard of it. I went back to my car and checked my phone, 4 bars of signal now, and searched for the town online. What I found made my hands go numb. Ridgeback had been a real place once, a small farming community that had dried up in the 80s when the local industry collapsed. Most of the residents had left, but a few families had stayed behind, becoming increasingly isolated. And according to one old news article I found, increasingly hostile to outsiders. There had been disappearances, investigations that went nowhere, rumors about people who drove through and never came out the other side. I filed a police report the next morning at a station 2 counties over. The officer who took my statement was polite but skeptical, the way cops get when they think you're wasting their time. He said he would look into it, but the way he said it told me nothing would come of it. A few weeks later, I got a call from a detective who asked me to describe the vehicles and the people again. He told me there had been other reports over the years. Travelers who had gotten lost near Ridgeback during storms, who had encountered people on the roads who tried to get them to stop. Most of those travelers had not been as lucky as me. He thanked me for the information and said the investigation was ongoing, but I never heard from him again. That was 8 years ago. I still drive for work sometimes, crossing through Kansas and Nebraska and the empty places in between. But I never take shortcuts anymore. I never trust the GPS when it tells me there's a faster way, and whenever I see an exit with no proper sign, just a metal post with faded reflectors, I keep my eyes on the road ahead, and I do not slow down. Every December, my sister Carolyn insists on hosting Christmas at her place in Raleigh, and every December I tell myself I should just fly instead of making the 7-hour drive from my apartment in Baltimore. But flights during the holidays cost more than my monthly rent, and besides, I actually enjoy the solitude of a long night drive, or at least I used to. That particular Friday, I left work around 8 in the evening, later than I wanted because a server migration at the IT company where I work decided to crash right before I clocked out. By the time I merged onto I-85 heading south, most of the traffic had thinned out, leaving me alone with the hum of my tires on asphalt and a podcast about unsolved disappearances that seemed fitting for the dark stretch ahead. My graduating class from high school had their 10-year reunion that summer, which I skipped, but it reminded me that time moves faster than we expect. Fast enough that a routine drive to see family can become something else entirely without any warning. The first 2 hours passed without incident. I stopped once at a gas station somewhere past Richmond, grabbed a large coffee and a bag of peanuts, stretched my legs in the cold air, and got back on the road. Virginia's highways at night have this particular emptiness to them, especially once you get past the suburbs and strip malls. The trees crowd close to the shoulder, their bare branches reaching toward the road like skeletal fingers, and the only light comes from your own headlights carving a tunnel through the darkness. I had the heat cranked up, my coffee wedged in the cup holder, and I was half listening to a story about a hiker who vanished in the Cascades when I first noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At that hour, seeing another car was almost comforting. Proof that I was not the only person awake in this corridor of nothing. I remember glancing at the clock on my dashboard, 11:47. I remember thinking the other driver was probably just as tired as me, just as eager to reach wherever they were going. I had no idea that those headlights would become the only thing I could think about for the next 3 hours. At first, I did not pay much attention. Cars follow other cars on highways, that is how roads work. But after about 10 minutes, I noticed the headlights were unusually bright, the kind of aggressive high beams that people forget to switch off when they approach other vehicles. The light flooded my rearview mirror and bounced off my side mirrors, creating this blinding halo effect that made it difficult to see anything behind me, except white glare. I tilted my rearview mirror down to reduce the reflection, a trick my father taught me when I first learned to drive. That helped a little, but I could still feel the intensity of the light pressing against the back of my head, washing out everything in my peripheral vision. I figured the driver was either oblivious or inconsiderate, the type of person who cruises in the left lane with their high beams on, because they simply do not care about anyone else. I sped up slightly, hoping to put some distance between us and signal that they were too close. The car behind me sped up too. I eased off the gas, dropping from 75 to 65. The headlights maintained the exact same distance, close enough to swallow my entire rear window in light. That was when a small knot began to form in my chest. I told myself I was being paranoid, that highway driving at night can play tricks on your perception, that distances are hard to judge when the only reference points are your own headlights and the reflective lane markers blurring past. I switched lanes, moving from the left to the right, expecting the car to blow past me and disappear into the darkness ahead. It did not. The headlights drifted smoothly into my lane, settling back into position directly behind me like a magnet snapping into place. I could not make out the shape of the vehicle through the glare, just those two burning white eyes fixed on my mirror. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I turned off the podcast because suddenly the story about the missing hiker did not seem entertaining anymore. The silence in the car felt heavy, interrupted only by the drone of my engine and the rhythmic thump of tires crossing expansion joints in the pavement. I watched the mile markers crawl past. 147, 146, 145. The headlights never wavered, never fell back, never surged forward to pass. They just stayed there, locked onto me like I was the only thing on this road that mattered. I decided to test my theory. An exit sign appeared ahead. Exit 142, some town I had never heard of called Bracy. I flicked on my turn signal, watching the mirror carefully for any reaction. The car behind me did nothing. No signal, no movement to pass, just that unwavering wall of light. I began to merge toward the exit ramp, slowing down as the lane curved away from the interstate. For a moment, I felt relief wash through me. The headlights were continuing straight, staying on I-85, and I was about to prove to myself that I had been acting like a paranoid fool who had watched too many true crime documentaries. Then, at the last possible second, the car swerved onto the exit ramp behind me. No turn signal, no gradual merge, just a sharp cut across the painted lines that made my heart lurch into my throat. The tires on the other vehicle actually squealed against the asphalt. Whoever was driving had made a split-second decision to follow me, and they had done it with the kind of aggressive precision that left no room for coincidence. I was no longer on a highway with other potential witnesses. I was on a dark two-lane road heading into rural Virginia, and the only other person out here had just made it very clear that wherever I went, they intended to go too. The road into Bracy was narrow and poorly lit, flanked by pine trees that blocked out whatever moonlight might have helped me see. My headlights caught glimpses of barbed wire fences and the occasional mailbox, but no houses close enough to the road for me to pull into a driveway and honk until someone came out. The car behind me had closed the distance. On the highway, they had maintained maybe 4 or 5 car lengths between us. Now it was 2 at most, close enough that the glare completely whited out my rearview mirror. I could feel the heat of their headlights on the back of my neck, or maybe I was imagining it, but the sensation was real enough to make me hunch forward in my seat. I fumbled for my phone with one hand, keeping my eyes locked on the winding road ahead. The screen lit up and I saw what I had been dreading. 1 bar of signal, flickering in and out like a dying heartbeat. I tried to call 911 anyway. The call failed before it even connected. I tried again, pressing the phone against my ear so hard it hurt. Nothing, just dead air and the glow of no service replacing my hope. The car behind me honked once, a long, sustained blast that echoed through the empty countryside like a warning shot. I pressed the accelerator harder, pushing my old Subaru Forester past 50 on a road that was probably meant for 35. The engine groaned in protest, but the speedometer climbed. 55. 60. The trees blurred into dark walls on either side of me, and I gripped the wheel with both hands, terrified of missing a curve and wrapping myself around a telephone pole. Behind me, the other car matched my speed effortlessly. When I accelerated, they accelerated. When I took a curve too fast and had to brake, they braked at the exact same moment, maintaining that suffocating distance like we were connected by an invisible tow cable. I started talking to myself out loud, something I do when I am scared and need to hear a human voice even if it is my own. Okay, think. There has to be a gas station, a store, something open. Just find lights, find people. But Bracy at midnight was a ghost town. The few buildings I passed were shuttered and dark. A closed hardware store, an abandoned feed supply warehouse, a church with no cars in the parking lot. I was alone with whoever was behind me, and they knew it. Then the road curved sharply to the left, and I saw a faint glow ahead, a fluorescent sign buzzing against the darkness. It was a small convenience store, the kind that sells cigarettes and lottery tickets and stays open late for truckers passing through. The parking lot was empty, except for one pickup truck near the entrance, probably belonging to whoever was working the register. I did not slow down to think about whether this was a good idea. I just yanked the wheel to the right and skidded into the parking lot, my tires spraying gravel as I came to a stop directly in front of the glass doors. I expected the car behind me to follow, to pull in beside me and reveal whoever had been hunting me for the past half hour. Instead, something worse happened. The car slowed as it approached the parking lot entrance, and for the first time, I got a partial look at it through my driver's side window. A dark pickup truck, maybe black or dark blue, with a lifted suspension and some kind of metal guard on the front bumper. It did not pull in, it just stopped at the edge of the lot, headlights still blazing, engine idling, waiting, watching. The driver did not get out, did not honk, did not do anything except sit there like a predator who had cornered its prey and was deciding what to do next. I threw open my door and ran inside the store, nearly tripping over my own feet as I pushed through the glass entrance. A bell chimed overhead, absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. The man behind the counter looked up from his phone with the tired expression of someone who had seen too many late-night weirdos to be surprised by anything. He was maybe 60 years old, with a gray beard that needed trimming and a faded camouflage jacket that suggested he spent his free time hunting deer rather than dealing with panicked strangers. "Someone is following me," I said, and my voice came out higher and faster than I intended. "There is a truck outside in the parking lot entrance. He has been chasing me since the highway. I need to call the police." The man, his name tag said Earl, leaned sideways to peer through the window behind me. His expression shifted from boredom to something harder, more alert. "Dark truck, lifted, got a brush guard on the front?" I nodded, unable to speak. Earl reached under the counter and pulled out a cordless phone, punching in numbers with practiced ease. "Yeah, this is Earl over at the quick stop on Route 58. Got a situation here. Some fella being chased by a truck. Vehicle is sitting at the edge of my lot right now, headlights on." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Will do." Earl hung up and looked at me with an expression that was difficult to read, part concern, part something else I could not identify. "Sheriff's deputy is about 15 minutes out. Only one on duty tonight covering the whole county. You stay inside. Keep away from the windows." I moved toward the back of the store, positioning myself behind a shelf of motor oil and windshield wiper fluid, where I could still see the entrance but would not be visible from outside. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Through the dusty glass, I watched the truck sitting at the edge of the parking lot, its headlights cutting two bright tunnels through the darkness. Minutes passed. 5, 10,